Hey guys, History Writer here. Welcome to the workbench. We're going to try something a little different with this little mini update. I wanted to show my technique for filling in gaps within the mold and fit. While I was piecing the wings together and fitting the engine nacelles, I noticed that there were a lot of gaps that are just starting to just really develop because either a poor fit or I got the fit together wrong. I don't know, but it just seems like it fit better in dry fit than it did with the cement on it, so I must have put the wrong pressure on it. So I have to fix that. Well, anyway, let me show you what I'm talking about. It's the most evident is on the lower side of the wing. If you look here, take a look. The ailerons there is just so much gaps, and then where the wings join the fuselage. Let me see if I can bring that up a little closer for you guys. There we go. Whoops. There we go. That's pretty nasty. That's pretty ugly. I am not a big fan of that at all. The top side, that turned out pretty nice, pretty well. You can see that when I put those together, they turned out nice. The other ones here is alongside there, and here on the other side. There's just places that we need to put gaps, filler in, and alongside the engine nacelles and the carburetor intakes. So that's what we're going to focus on today. It's no fun, but it's got to be done. I know that there's a few different ways to do it. I was once shown how to with the squadron putties and thinners and the little scalpel blades for the molding, the putty knives, and that just blew my mind. I was like, well, you know, I didn't want to become a sculptor, so never mind that. Then on the International Scale Modeler, there's lots of tips, lots of tricks and techniques, and somebody suggested, hey, you know, what about Mr. Surfacer? And I read up on that. And it turns out that Mr. Surfacer, being a lacquer-based, oh, what is it? A primer. It's an actual primer. They have different grades of primer for it. There's 500, there's 1000, I think there's a 1200 and a 1500. But I'm using Mr. Surfacer 500 for it. So let me go ahead and bring that here for you. So there is Mr. Surfacer 500. Let's open it up if I can without spilling anywhere, and I'll show you what it looks like. It is just a nice, real thick gray goop, so we'll leave that open because we'll need it in a moment. And then to clean up the mess, or to make it flow better, is I use the lacquer thinner. I got mine from Tamiya. They do a really nice job working together. Other tools of the trade for putting filler in is, of course, Q-tips, cotton Q-tips, or buds, however you pronounce it, and a junker paintbrush, preferably one that has kind of a chisel tip or a pointed tip to it, so that you can get into a lot of the finer seams. So the way it works is you find your gap and you just liberally paint it on to try and get some into the gap, and then you let it set for a few moments, and then maybe paint another coat on, and then try and while it's still try not to wait while it's drying too much. You want to get it while it's still kind pliable and malleable, is where, so that you can scrape some and continue to mold it while it's still wet form. So we'll go ahead and give it a shot here, so you can see I got a nice good amount on the brush, and then what you do is right over the seam, just can see how I'm just painting it, and I'm dabbing it in, so I want to kind of apply it a little liberally, dab it in so it can cover both seams there. Okay, and you can see that there's quite the step of it right here. So I'm gonna have to let that one dry for a while. So what we'll do instead is, while that's drying and setting, I will focus on some of the others. So how about this one? This one looks nice. So you want to try and get on both sides of the seam that you're wanting to fill. The reason being is so that you can have a better area to control the gap, you can control the fill that's going into it, and it will also add, if you have to sand it down, depending on the kind of gap or how much filler you put in, it's going to be easier to sand and make flush. So that's why you want to do it that way. So you can see there that I've got a couple of the corners painted in, and we will go along and just add that there. There's probably won't be too much. So now that it's dried a little bit, we're going to go for coat number 2. Okay. You see how it's kind of drying over the top of it and adding a second layer? That's what we want. Alright, well, just to keep everything short, we'll just practice on this one, and then off camera I will do everything else, and we'll see the results of it in the next update I post. So there we are. So far, this has actually been a pretty nice kit. The only problem that I've had so far is just the amount of this gap. The gaps that I've discovered recently when putting the last few steps together. But what can you do? I mean, it's just one of those things. And with the more practice, even though we don't want to have more practice of doing this, it seems to get better and better. So I might have to go and clean that out and put glue in there instead to act as a little bit of a filler. So we'll just go ahead and let that dry for a few moments. And oh yes, always make sure to try and keep your gap filler, if you're using the Mr. Surfacer, keep it as closed capped as you can, as often as you can, just so that it doesn't dry out and cake and start becoming real nasty clumps. Alright, we'll clean off the brush here. The one thing about the lacquer thinner is it is really, really thin, and it just loves to run everywhere. So if you're using cotton balls or whatever you use to clean off your brushes with it, I use a cotton ball and just soak a little bit and then just use the cotton ball to wick off all the paint off the brush tip. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and clean that off. Now, we're going to use Q-tip. Let's see if we've got that here. I just get the Q-tip wet and try to get as much excess moisture as I can off of there. And what you want to do is, I'll do this side here just because that one I'm going to have to do later. We get it as wet as we can, just so we can start rubbing off on the sides here. Just put some pressure there, and let's get some of that excess moisture off on a towel. And let's do that. So you can see that it is starting to come off, and if you do it alongside the seam, it's pushing the excess stuff into the seam, but it's also cleaning off the excess along the side there. So if you just put some nice pressure and just kind of rub it along like that. Now the cool thing is if you do this before you prime it, the discoloration of the plastic will actually go away. And okay, it looks like I might have to retouch that. Okay. The discoloration of plastic, when the lacquer thinner dries, it will still be there, but when you prime it, that goes all away and it still looks like a nice smooth plastic. Okay. So it looks like I might need to do a little bit more retouching, but I think you guys get the idea here. Well, what do you think? Maybe a little bit more thinner. Okay. And then, just depending on the type of pressure, you can put as much or as little pressure as you want, as you need on there. And there you have it. So let's go ahead and wipe that stuff dry and off. Alright, so now let's just go ahead over the top with dry one. There, you can see that it's not the best job in the world right now, but it got the point across, so I'll just go through later and touch it up. But I'll need to touch up here because there's more of a seam there. What I want is a little bit of a seam but just not all those nasty gaps like here. That's pretty nasty ugly. Or you can see over here, that's going to be real fun to fill. So I'll probably use glue on that one. And then up here, I've got some work to do on that seam as well. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a tutorial. Probably not the greatest it could be, but hey, I'm still new at this. I welcome any and all feedback. Tips and tricks help me get better at it. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. See you on the forums. History Writer out.